Okay, so we are closing today with an end of day keynote from Phil Bryce. Now, I specifically so two things. I asked for two favors today: to be able to introduce Phil for this, and to be able to toast him later when we do the cocktail. So I'm going to share personal stuff about Phil later, but professionally, this is really important to know about Phil Bryce. 25 years ago this month, I started in knowledge management. 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, I met Phil Bryce. And I met Phil Bryce because 25 years ago, he was doing what he has done every subsequent year in his career, which is meet and connect people, because he cares so deeply about this community. The context in which I met Phil was that he was the organizer and the facilitator of knowledge management meetings between the New York and the Toronto large law groups, which subsequently became larger meetings and larger meetings. And for many years, Phil was the chair of these sessions. Phil, to this day, when people come in internationally, I don't know how they know, but they get in touch with Phil Bryce. And then Phil will let me and a whole bunch of others know, oh, this person's in from Singapore, this person's in from the Middle East, this person's in from South Africa. Would you like to meet with them? They do knowledge management in their firm. They're getting started. He has always been a hub. Now, what I think is going to be really interesting as we go through this, his war stories, his reminiscences, is when I met Phil all those years ago, I thought that we were like the same age, peers, right? Because he's ageless. And the reason why he's ageless, one, he is ageless, people. So I grew up watching a soap opera called The Guiding Light. Does anybody here remember Guiding Light? Okay. I loved The Guiding Light. That was my mom watched it, therefore, that's what I watched when I go home from school at 3 o'clock. So Phil's dad played Bill Bauer on the Guiding Light radio show in 1948, and then transitioned the role to television. And Phil's brother was also a soap opera actor. Which soap, Phil? As the World Turns. So one day Phil goes, oh, I have this like video clip of myself extraing on a soap opera. And I was like, oh, that's really cool that they let you walk on and like, you know, put on the scrubs and be in the hospital. And I had no idea that by the time Phil met me, he had already had 6 careers, one of which had been acting. And so, you know, he, as Phil embraced this latter part of his professional life and became truly one of the knowledge management originals, for everything that he's contributed. It's not projects. It's not using tech. It is the culture, the collaboration that he has instilled in so many of us. And when you look at this event now, I guarantee you that the DNA of this event lies with the work that Phil was doing 25 years ago when I first showed up on this scene. So Phil, I want to say on behalf of everyone here a huge thank you. And please come on up and talk to us.
I love you, man. I love you. That was very kind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. And I have to say thank you. Being part of this community has been the best part of my life. And I have dear friends here, like Joshua and so many others. You know, I look around at faces I know, people I feel so close to personally and professionally, and we've been driven by passion and curiosity about how to make the life better for hardworking lawyers. You know, I was a litigation associate. I'm going to talk about my life and my family and how I became a knowledge management lawyer and sort of things that have stuck out in my mind. But I have told people on my team that, you know, I practice law and I remember working 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 weeks, you know, going home at midnight, taking, you know, going to sleep, waking up at 3 a.m., taking a shower, and going back to the office. So I've always felt like it's my job to be worth it, right? If you think about the economics, the business of law, and I've learned a lot about it. I've learned over the last 30 years how to think like a partner. Like, why am I here? What is the law firm trying to do, and what's the best way for me to be part of that? And I've always felt like we have to be worth it. We have to. And I calculated once. I was at White and Case at the time, and I had like a team of 5, and I calculated that there were like 3 associates, and all the revenue that they were bringing in was going to us, and they were missing their children's events, and they were working over the holidays. And I said, we have to be not just the money, but we have to be worth that. So I've always had that passion, and I've loved my job. You hear about people like waiting 5 o'clock, can I go home? And for me, it was more like looking at the clock. Oh no, it's 7 o'clock, I have to go home. I can't keep doing this, but I wanted to stay and keep solving problems and thinking about things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my family history. Some people know the story. I think about my father's father, who was a coal miner. We'll talk about that. How lucky I feel, how privileged. My nonlinear career that Joshua just referred to. The KM community, what it was like to be around when we started coalescing and gathering, and what I've seen in legal KM. Do I know where it's going? Well, I'm retiring. What did Rodney say? I'm retiring on January 2nd, so good luck after that. And there's a lot to think about now. So let's talk about family history. This is my father's family at one point in time. My grandfather, Robert, born in 1880, as was my grandmother, Elizabeth, in Scotland. My grandfather was a coal miner outside of Edinburgh, and Robert and Elizabeth had 10 children in Scotland. The youngest one, Mary, passed away very early, but they always counted her. So I knew about her much later. And in 1921, they got on a boat in Glasgow and came through Ellis Island and went out to Western Pennsylvania, where my grandfather and my 4 oldest uncles worked in the coal mines. My father, Edward, who is the second shortest, was the 11th child born in Pennsylvania, and I'm named after his younger brother, who's right in the front there, Philip, who is the 12th child born here. My grandfather got a black lung from, he worked 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day in the coal mines. If I'm in my office ever and I think, why do I have this problem at work? I get upset. I think, I'm not working. This is fun. I'm making decisions. I can decide what I want to do today. My grandfather didn't have that. I think he worked, and his work, he made it possible. He and my grandmother, my amazing grandmother, made it possible, for me to be here doing this. So that's the family. They moved to Detroit, got work at Ford. That was kind of the family place. And then my dad went off to World War II, was a lieutenant in the Army Air Force, and served in Italy as a radar officer. And when he came back, he was able to go to college on the GI Bill. And I don't know why, but he went to the University of Denver. And what he said was that he wandered by the theater, and there were auditions going on, and he just happened to be cast as the lead in the musical. And then later that year, they did another musical, and he just happened to be cast as the lead. But he did, I guess when I think about it, kind of a brave thing. He dropped out of college, and he moved to New York to pursue a career of in theater, and he had immediate success. He was the understudy to the leading man in 2 different Broadway musicals in this year, Sam Levine and Sir Alfred Drake. And Theater World still gives away these awards. They named 10 of the most promising debut performances on Broadway or off-Broadway. And my dad was chosen in 1948 to get that prestigious award. And then he met my mother, Dorothy. She grew up on Staten Island. Her father was a talent scout who went down to the Jersey Shore and brought acts up into New York. And she was kind of a force of nature. She skipped 2 grades, graduated high school when she was 15, and was the president of her senior class, and formed a theater company and hired my father. And that's how they met. And then my dad got work on early live television. He played Captain Strong on Saturday Morning Kids show. And then, as Joshua said, he played Bill Bauer on Guiding Light. And I used to go down to the CBS Broadcast Center on 57th Street and watch them do it live. There was no videotape yet in the early 60s. So his career, developed. We moved from the city out to the suburbs, Westport, Connecticut. And this is tangential, but some really great bands played at my high school when I was there. Before they were big time, the Doors, Cream. There's actually a documentary called The High School That Rocked about my high school. And also, it was innovative because I took a computer math class in high school, and I started programming in Fortran and GW Basic. We had so this is 1968, and we had, a machine that you would put in your GW Basic or Fortran code, and it would put out a tape. And then we had a phone cradle to a mainframe computer at Princeton University, and in a little monitor, a little mono monitor. And I was writing programs just to figure out what your average was. It was literally calculator stuff, but we learned a lot, and it all made sense in my brain. And I was took calculus in high school and would do extra calculus homework for fun. So that sort of logic side of my brain was always working. And I got into Tufts University, early decision. So I knew early on in my senior year where I would go to college. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. But then I skipped a grade. I graduated from high school when I was 17 years old. The draft was happening, Vietnam. And I realized, and at the time, being in college was a draft deferment. So I thought, why am I going to college when I'm 17? I should take a year off, which I did. And Tufts said, okay. And I went to Hawaii. And I lived on Maui in that truck and worked as a waiter. And then I went to Tufts, and I got my degree in theater, and I set out to work as an actor. During those years, and my dad's acting jobs went away, family, financial troubles. I had worked my way through college. I was a line cook for a couple of years, and then a cab driver in Boston. I drove a cab 4 nights a week during my junior and senior years. And I was getting acting work. I did a community theater production, Long Day's Journey into Night, great show. I thought, I don't need to make money as an actor. I need a job, and I'll be an actor in community theater at night. What should I do? I decided in 5 minutes to go to law school. Did way better in law school than I thought I would. Graduated in '78. Law review. I figured out I wanted to be a litigator, and I got a job, great job as a law clerk for a federal judge, T.F. Gilroy Daley. Interestingly, he had just been appointed to the bench, and each year his new law clerks would get together with the old law clerks. We had dinners, and we all got really close. Judge Daley passed away in 1996, unfortunately, very young. He was really an amazing courtroom judge, 6'6". He had been, he's incredibly charismatic, and we all, there was a real family feeling. And the law clerks still get together. In fact, Saturday, we are meeting for lunch, 30 years after Judge Daley passed away, almost 30 years. So then I got recruited, wound up with Bingham, Dana, and Gould in Boston as a litigation associate. And this is where I started thinking, I guess we could say, about legal knowledge and legal knowledge management. But what were we doing? We were using typewriters. In high school, I'd taken a typing class, so I was a fast typist, which was good. But my secretary had a typewriter. We made carbon copies of things, and there was like a file drawer with, copies of things in it. Actually, and this was innovation, right? When the golf ball, the typewriter's electric, and now there's a golf ball instead of the keys, and the amazing thing was, you could change the golf ball halfway through your line. You could change fonts. This was really amazing. And my secretary and I had to keep track of everything she typed. And by the time I was a second-year associate, I had my own secretary, and I kept her really busy. And one thing that's changed, I think, at law firms, we were partners. She knew everything about all the matters I was working on. If somebody called, she knew what the matter was. She knew if I wanted to talk to them. She knew whether to interrupt me. And that relationship doesn't really exist anymore at law firms, lawyers, and a dedicated assistant. But we had to keep track. Oh, and I was going to say, the file room worked really well because you knew if you had the original, right? You could tell by the stationery, and you knew you had to get that to the file room. So if I was asked to work on a pending litigation matter, like to help with a motion for summary judgment, what would I do? I'd go to the file room, and I'd get the correspondence folder and the pleadings folder, take them back to my office, and within a couple hours, I knew everything. I knew the procedural posture of the case. I knew what arguments were being made. I could tell from the correspondence folder who we were getting along with, what all the relationships were. And now, it's really hard to do that. For an associate who gets assigned to a matter, what do you have to do? Like, one of the senior associates has to take you to their office and talk to you for 2 hours and try to relate everything to you, because is there a file? I mean, you can go look for US litigation, you can get to the pleadings and all of that, but a lot of that, the stuff that would be easy to see from the correspondence, and the correspondence was more limited. You were really careful about what you wrote. If you were writing a letter, you really were more thoughtful than what you might shoot off in an email or a text. So I think we've been trying to get back to stuff that worked in the past. The Lexus terminal arrived, right? And is Michelle around? I don't know. Or our friends from Lexus. I remember that day, and it was really expensive to use. And dot matrix printer, right? You would get your research results and print them out. You had to pull the margins off the paper and take it back to your office. We had to keep track of everything that Regina, my secretary, typed for 3 months in order to qualify for an IBM memory typewriter. That changed our lives. Now we didn't have to use whiteout. We could, she didn't have to retype the whole thing. We could make corrections on the fly. It made life much easier. So I, meanwhile, am thinking about, wait, I'm working 17 hours a day. I thought I was going to be an actor. And after 5 years, my younger brother became a soap opera star. He was on, as we mentioned earlier, As the World Turns, started with Craig Montgomery, or rather has Craig Montgomery, but with Meg Ryan. And that allowed, and he's had a great career, actually. So, was on Soap Opera Week, Soap Opera Digest. He was the first cad on Sex and the City. In the pilot, he was the guy who, they had a great romance, and then he ghosted her. Some of you may remember that. And he's done tons of other things, lots and lots of credit since. So that allowed me to quit. And that's me on my last day at Binghamdana with 3 guys who are still very good friends. So what did I do? I went off to be an actor now. And I worked on, As the World Turns, All My Children with Susan Lucci. I was on Ryan Soap. I worked on every New York soap opera. I was Eddie Harris for 6 weeks on All My Children. I stalked Natalie. Eddie did, not me. And he threw her on an operating room table and tried to anesthetize her while he told her how much he liked her. I did a few commercials, did some other things, an Up All Night Bewitched take off with Rhonda Shear, but I made most of my money as a corporate spokesperson, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, banks, reading teleprompters, how to sell the new drug to docs, Boehringer Ingelheim. This is a list of companies that I did corporate spokesperson work for. So it was a good almost 2 decades acting career. I also had a survival job. Oh, and also I got into, like, PCs came out, and I bought one, the AT&T, really expensive for what it was, but I read the DOS manual, and I was actually using the PC and mail merge to print postcards that I sent out to casting directors and producers. So I was kind of mass producing my marketing as an actor. And at this time, these things started coming out, right? I don't know if others would remember, but you were walking into a gas station or a drugstore, and there were racks of CompuServe, Prodigy, and I got Prodigy. I still have a Prodigy email address, and these were online. You could log into their servers, but it wasn't the internet yet. It wasn't the web. You could communicate with other Prodigy members, and you could find things. But I got part-time work at Debevoise and Plimpton. This is partner Jeff Wood, who found things for me to do. Starting in 1986, I was writing summaries of legal research documents, and I was helping to manage a hard copy loose leaf set of corporate standard forms. WordPerfect came out. We started, right? We had, and at first we had, the lawyers had PCs with 2 5¼ floppy drives, one with the program on it and one with your documents on it. I don't know if anybody here remembers that. Yeah, that's right. And you could tell, right? I like this because you could see exactly, you could diagnose, like, what's on, what's off. So really, like, that PC docs arrived. And am I right? Did NetDocs just buy eDocs that became interwoven, et cetera, et cetera? So that happened, and I just went and asked questions of the document services people and the IT people. I had this loose leaf of standard forms, about 30 corporate model documents. So I figured, and I was tired of updating putting the new ones in when they got updated. So I figured out how to get them all in really good, healthy WordPerfect form, get them in PC Docs, and get an icon, a project icon on everyone's desktop, so now they could get to the documents easily. And that just made my life easier, and I could do more interesting things. The internet arrived, the web came a little later. I don't know if anyone ever saw this. Eric Heels, University of Maine School of Law, he started keeping a document that listed all of the legal resources that you could get over the internet. And in 1994, it was about this thick. And in 1995, it was about this thick, and he quit. And this is when, Yahoo came out and Google came out. So really an interesting decade of advancement in technology. So around 1999, my acting career had flattened out. I didn't get a contract role on a soap. I wanted to have a family. I was getting older. And I approached, then I was reporting to John Curry for my part-time by-the-hour work. And I said, I want to come and be a litigation associate. I want a job. And John said, well, we could do that, but we really like all the things you do. I'd been building, like, web, just had been finding problems to solve without needing to be told much. And he said, why don't you just do more? Why don't you be our knowledge management lawyer, and you tell us what to do? Literally, John said that to me. I called him up, by the way, about a month ago to thank him, because he gave me a full-time job at Debevoise and Plimpton as knowledge resources counsel. And I started thinking, well, I'd been grappling with how do lawyers work, how do we want to work, been thinking about the email, the document management system, documents, the file room, records, websites. And I came up with this idea that we don't want to go to different applications. And this is 25 years ago. And I drew it. In 2000, I said, what if we could get to everything all in one interface? And I advised the firm that we should buy a portal and build this. And we actually did buy, we had DebWeb. What was it? What was your Stratosphere? So Debevoise, DebWeb. And I was building practice pages and matter pages in Microsoft front page. So kind of learning about things. And I did recommend that Debevoise buy the Plumtree portal, which Lexis was the marketing arm for at the moment for law firms. And Debevoise did buy it, but I left and got recruited over to White & Case. But they never built the portal with it that I always envisioned. So now I'm at Debevoise and I invite I network and I invite a bunch of people over to lunch one day in 2001, October 2001. So almost 25 years ago. And these were just some of the great mentors that I met then or before that. We've talked about Michael Mills. I heard he was speaking in Boston. I drove up and went to this conference. I introduced myself to him. He was at Davis Polk at the time. And I told him I'm a new knowledge management guy. And he said, well, come over to Davis Polk. And he spent a day with me. And he told me everything they were doing and everything he knew. He's an amazing mentor. I did get to speak with him again. We became good friends. And I got to speak to him about a month before we lost him. Ron Friedman was holding legal tech meetings in the 90s. I was going to them. He was already thinking about how to build the community. Greta Rusenow was at PwC advising law firms about knowledge management, and she wrote a book. We'll talk about knowledge management and the Smarter Lawyer, and I read it in galleys. I wrote a blurb that was on the inside cover, but she taught me a lot. She taught me how to think strategically. Marty Metz was with Lawport, SV Technologies. That was like the competing portal with Plumtree, and he spent hours and hours with me. Kingsley Martin, I don't know how many of you know him. On DebWeb, we didn't have a search engine, and I met Kingsley and I said this, and he said, I can do that for you, and we agreed that he would come to Debevoise one day, and he sat down in a conference room and coded a search engine for that worked. It was like and we talked. He was very amazing. And then, of course, Oz, who's, my brother, the yin to my yang. We worked together at White & Case, and he's been a great influence in my life. And have to mention the magician, Jeff Rovner. I think Michelle said this morning that she was a mini magician. But Jeff was in New York early years when he was at Brobeck. But then he was with Clifford Chance, and he spent a year living in New York and met with us in the early days of the New York large law firm knowledge management group. So we first met that group in 2001. We heard that Paul Greenwood was coming over for legal tech in February 2002 from still the CIO at Clifford Chance, I think. So we had instead of a lunch meeting, we had a morning post-legal tech meeting. That has happened every year since then and essentially morphed into skills. Joshua talked about the New York, Toronto Summit, and that's where I met so many. And, it's impossible to mention everybody and everything. I mean, Joshua, Andrea Alliston, Mara Nickerson, Ginevra Saylor, right? I mean, Kate Simpson, Duncan Duncan's here, right? Like, we all met in those years. It was amazing. The ILTA KM peer group, and this was Catherine Monte's idea, maybe Chris Boyd also in 2007. We had like local groups. There was a West Coast group. There was a Ron Friedman DC group. But what's the overall hub? And I think it was Catherine's idea. Well, ILTA already has a structure. Let's just fit into it. And interestingly, that was when even before like technology, and this is oversimplifying, but it was really like plumbing structure. But now the technology people were being asked to think about law firm strategy and knowledge. And so all of a sudden, the knowledge management sessions at ILTA became the most popular ones. And of course, we've had several knowledge management leaders who've become, ILTA presidents, et cetera. So that's become a major thing. And this is the, our post-legal tech, photos from, I think these are from before COVID, of the gatherings. We wound up with globally 75 to 100 people. I mean, these were amazing meetings. And, now skills carries on that tradition. What an amazing community we've built together over the last 25 years. So going back now, the New York Large Law Firm Group is meeting starting in 2001. And in 2003, we were kind of talking about the same stuff. We decided we needed an agenda. So we imagined that a 500 lawyer law firm had appeared out of nowhere and that someone had been told to lead the knowledge management effort there. And we asked ourselves, what would we tell that person to do? And so we came up with a list, and we had pre-KM conditions, core KM elements, and KM enablers. And this was really interesting work, I think. And this is our top 20. We voted, like, which is the most important among all the members of the New York group. And this was our top 20, right, a precedence. And at the beginning, we all thought that we were solving the drafting problem, right? I need to draft a parent guarantee. Where do I start? Like, and we asked the lawyers for the good ones, put them in a database, have them search it. We thought it was that simple. And, what have we morphed to, thinking about how do we support this business, right? Data, we've heard all about data. We've heard about experience management, search, content management. So, but I think it's really interesting to look back even then at what we thought. And I think this list is still worth referencing, because you can't just jump to generative AI is going to solve my problems. We did create a bibliography for knowledge management that was published on the ILTA site. Deb Pinella at Cravath played a big role in this. And so 2004, I moved over to White and Case. Oz Ben Amram came later there. And now these are just things that we've thought about over the years. That's kind of where my story went that far. This is a Jeff Rovner, Kingsley Martin presentation from 2007, Legal Tech, about the long tail. Why is Amazon one of the most visited sites on the web as opposed to Barnes & Noble Borders? Because Amazon figured out how to deliver the long tail, and they said, we have to do that too. If we want to put out a knowledge management system and we want people to come back, then they have to find something that's useful to them. And if they don't, right? So Borders, Barnes & Noble have the bestsellers and the classics, Shakespeare, et cetera. But how do I find a book on beekeeping in Argentina? That's the one I'll come back to. So how can we, so that got, I think, all of us thinking about minimizing curation, using search, thinking about content more broadly. This was really instrumental in my personal approach to knowledge management, and the idea that we want to build windmills rather than treadmills. Instead of saying, oh, everybody give us your good documents, and now we're going to build a knowledge management database of good documents. Leave them where they are, figure out how to do enterprise search was kind of the solution, and leverage our existing business processes as much as possible. Don't curate unless the payoff is huge. And so that was one of the principles that has driven me in my career. And these slides are not just all mine. They came from Oz and others in the knowledge management community. We've shared them for years, but we started thinking about the content that we have to think about. And we originally thought we only cared about what we published, standard forms, know-how, best practices. Now we realize there's actually a big pyramid of content. And what do we care about most? Our clients and our matters. And if we instead of building a document database for knowledge documents and tagging them, M&A, 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 the client is a pharmaceutical company every time, well, we already know the matters in M&A matter. We already know the client's a pharmaceutical company. Enterprise search will help us find that. And we should curate more as we go up and as we go down, and the magnitude of the content increases, then we should use search or automation, those kinds of things. And I think we still need, as knowledge management people, even in this era of AI and generative AI, to make sure we're addressing these layers of content and really helping lawyers, practicing lawyers, figure out, where do I put things? How do I name them? What should I do? And especially if we want them to be accessible by AI tools, right? We do want good content management. We started thinking, therefore, about how are we capturing information about our matters? When should we capture it? We tended to do it just at the beginning when we open a matter, and then after the matter's closed, we want people to come back and categorize it. Well, wouldn't it be better if we found collection points along the way, triggers? This matter has been very active, and then the activity drops off. Well, let's go ask the lawyers to give us more information about it. This is a classic KM hierarchy. What I've often said when I've shown this slide to people is that I've spent almost my whole career trying to answer data and information challenges, right? That's mostly what people have asked for. And I've thought of 0 as we have all our data and information in hand. We have mastery over our business data and information, and then we could think about, how do I do work, or should I? But I've never been able to get to 0 at a law firm. It's very hard. Kingsley, now thinking about machine learning, AI, processing. This was a Kingsley Martin. He figured out how to build, he had a tool called K-Reveal. Let's build a big collection of related documents, and then the tool will identify common clauses, not by how they're labeled, but by their content, and which are negotiated values, standard. So this started, this is a KM peer group at ILTA thinking about the top 10. So I think we should think about that still today, right? The top 10 KM projects, enterprise search was up there now, and this is 2010 now. Just want to highlight some of the great books. We all, Richard Susskind, and he, this really influenced us, I think, thinking about where am I on this, commodity versus bespoke time frame. If you haven't read Bruce McEwen's, he started writing about the business of law way before it was super popular. Some of the great knowledge management books, including Greta's that I mentioned, Matthew Parsons, Patrick DiDomenico, Patrick Dundas was here. There we go. Yep. And there are a lot of other authors for those, but these are notable. Dan Katz, some of the professors that we've known, Dan Linna, Bill Henderson, have done great work, and I'm kind of rushing a little bit now to get through this. We started thinking about all the business pressures on legal services delivery. Clock formed, right? The buy side started thinking about, and knowledge management is in their wheel. So I think, and I have advised our law firms we should really be listening to the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, legal project management hit. So, and this is just a very quick pastiche, but these were really critical principles, critical thinking, process mapping. This is a slide of one of the steps, one of the big steps broken out in detail in Mayor Brown's commercial litigation process map. I still think this is, and I like to show a video. We were talking about innovation. Someone, I think, earlier today was talking about having laid out a process. I think it was Michelle this morning about the founder. And we'll go out in the parking lot and lay out the process. I'm a big NASCAR fan, stock car racing. When I started watching pit stops were like you went to your neighborhood gas station. You know, somebody came out and cleaned your windshield and they changed the tires. But they figured out that that was slowing them down. And a modern NASCAR pit stop, and I'll just ask you to think about, imagine 5 people, one with a jack and 2 crews with, you know, the tires and a wrench, and they're going to change 4 tires on a stock car with 5 lug nuts on each side. What's the fastest amount of time they could do that in? And if you'd asked me, I probably would have said 2 minutes. You know, they do it in 12 seconds. 12 seconds. So what if we thought about a private equity portfolio acquisition and we said, okay, now it takes us 3 months to do that. How do we do it in 3 days? What do we have to change? What tools, what, you know, and they, because they thought about everything. They changed the wrench, everything was different. So I think process mapping is really important, and this is an arena too. I think, you know, we're talking with Jamal. I saw you, Jamal Brown from JP Morgan, you know, JP Morgan, yes. So Mayor Brown, JP Morgan, have been thinking about the lending process, you know, and I think, Joshua, you were asking earlier about, you know, that's, I think, really exciting future is the client law firm, you know, stickiness, but really, like, because we process mapped what we do inside the firm, but when we were talking to JP Morgan about trying to streamline the lending process, there are like 5 handoffs. Like, you should process map both sides, the whole thing. So that's where I would want to focus going forward. This just was, you know, blew my mind when Mark Chandler, the Cisco general counsel, presented this at a clock conference. This is about the, you know, are things like we have to have leases, you know, we have to have employment. Those are contexts, but our core things, Cisco builds and sells switches and circuits and routers and things. So, and then is it mission critical or not? And in the corners are the percentage of his in-house legal team that he thinks should be focused on that. So 65% should be focused on core mission critical things. In Tastem, I think what's interesting here is in the lower left, non-mission critical context, outsource the whole. Nobody in my legal team should be thinking about that. I moved to Mayor Brown. Everybody remembers when Deep Blue beat Kasparov at chess, but the AI techies know that this was even bigger. Go, when AlphaGo beat Lee Sodolka's Go, where you just place stones and you're trying to surround each other, and I played a lot of Go in my 20s, way more complicated, way more possibilities. You know, chess is essentially, Deep Blue is brute force. This was really self-teaching, so a big deal. Paul Chong at IBM, what do humans do well? What do computers do well? And if we think about these as a Venn diagram, you know, you can imagine that what the side of the circle that is what humans do well probably is kind of the same. The side of what computers do well, much, much bigger. This is Michael Mills, AI, so we've seen that. Rob Saccone, he's not here at the moment, but you know, he started thinking about the AI landscape at the ILTA conference. He and I had a big discussion about whether AI can predict. And I said, no, it shops, right? All it does is look for, based on what it has, it looks for a thing that might fit as the next thing. So I said, it's not predicting, it's just shopping. That was a fun conversation. We talked at the C-level breakout about how to prioritize. This is a grid that Sally Gonzalez and McKinsey and O's taught me how to use. And I'm not going to talk about it today, but happy to talk later with anyone. You know, how I present what is knowledge management at my law firm today, but we really have to learn, more important than ever, to work together. Innovation, knowledge, finance, marketing, we have to be a team. So where's KM going? I don't know. My advice would be, keep it simple. I still think we have to think about content management. Gen AI is an enabler, like spell check. Spell check, you know, just arrived one day. I know that it's not, you know, it's going to help me. It's not perfect. I can teach it, that Brexit is a new word. I think that's how we want to think of Gen AI, but we have to still think about content management, basic principles. The key with Gen AI is it helps us make things actionable, right? It's going to do, instead of just giving us a list, it's going to maybe take an action. So for me, next is getting my guitar out, spending time with my beautiful wife, Patricia, and our family and friends, and maybe I'll send out my headshot again. So, thank you.